It's Jeff at Darkmoon Metals. In today's video I want to talk about sharpening tungsten for TIG welding. And if you're interested in TIG welding, it's a skill that you're going to have. Now, before I begin with the demonstration, I just want to say that I went out on the web and I actually looked at a lot of these videos that talk about how to sharpen tungsten. And it seemed like a lot of them were more like commercials than they were informational videos. I saw everything from the standard sharpen it on the bench grinder to here's a nice diamond, industrial diamond wheel, here's a $500 tungsten grinder, and you really don't need all that. If you're on YouTube and you're looking at a video on how to sharpen tungsten, chances are you're a beginning TIG welder. You don't need all the fancy stuff. The odds of Lockheed Martin, Boeing, or anybody else coming to your house and asking you to come weld for them tomorrow are slim to none. So we're going to do it very basic. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to use a regular bench grinder with a regular stone. For this demo, I'm going to be using a DeWalt right off the shelf bench grinder. It's going to use the wheel that came with it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen, so we can get it in there, with, let it focus. Will it focus? I hope so. Yeah, there it is. I'm going to put this point on this tungsten. This is good all around grind. I like using it. Serves me well. Now the first thing I want to tell you is if you do not have a dedicated wheel for your tungsten, it is not the end of the world. There are people out there who will tell you that you can't use a wheel that you've sharpened a steel tool on or anything else if you're going to grind tungsten. It's got to be a tungsten only wheel. And yeah, it is true that impurities can get inside the tungsten when you're grinding. But one of the things I want to point out is if you're only welding mild steel, the worst thing that's going to happen is the arc may wander a hair and you have to resharpen it. It really isn't the end of the world if you sharpen a tungsten on your everyday wheel, as long as you haven't been grinding weird things like brass or aluminum or things you shouldn't be grinding on a bench grinder anyway. That being said, if you're welding high-end Inconel 718 or you're welding aluminum, things like that, you want to have the cleanest tungsten possible. But if you're just messing around in your shop with mild steel, use your wheel. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to kill anything. Worst thing that's going to happen is you've got to resharpen the tip because your arc wanders a little bit. So let me show you how to sharpen this. Glasses. Always wear your glasses. When you're grinding, how you hold the tungsten is kind of important. You don't want to grind like this. It'll cause swirls to go in the metal and you'll actually have steps rather than a nice sharpened point. Think of electricity flowing like water. If you put ripples in your tungsten, the electricity goes over those ripples and it can cause some distortion. You want your grind to be going in the same direction as your electrode. You want the electricity to flow nice and straight through the tungsten. Now for the next tungsten, I'm going to show you how I sharpen my tungstens. The way I showed you was how I was traditionally taught in school, and it's how most people will sharpen their tungstens. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of address two different things. The first is I'm going to use my wheel, the same wheel that I use for everything else. But I'm not going to have impurities in my tungsten, and I can almost guarantee it. I do a lot of aluminum welding, and sharpening by the method that I've shown you, I've never had any problems with contamination in the electrode. So what's different from how everyone else does it? Let me show you. I'm going to take my tungsten and I'm going to sharpen it on the side of the wheel. listening for trolls, because I know there's going to be people out there who want to comment in the video. And before you do, talking about how it's very, very dangerous to sharpen things on the side of a wheel like this, there's two things that I want to point out. One, the reason that I do it is because I can see the tungsten. I can actually see the angle that I'm putting on it, because I'm looking at it right down on top of the tip. I'm not sitting on an angle looking straight on at both the stone and the tungsten. The other thing is, when I'm holding it, my fingers are closer to the wheel on short, stubby pieces of tungsten rather than off to the side. It's actually safer for me to do it the way I'm doing it. So, is it bad to sharpen things on the side of a wheel? Yeah. If you're sharpening something like a hatchet or a chisel or some other farm implement. You're not supposed to come in contact with the side of the wheel with anything you're going to apply pressure to it. The wheel is not designed to have pressure applied to it in that way. That being said, the tungsten will break way before there's enough stress put on a wheel that will ever cause it to fail. Tungsten will break way before wheel. So I just want to point that out to all the naysayers out there who think I'm doing something evil by showing this, who will claim that the wheel will explode or a bolt of lightning will fly out of the machine and crawl up my butt. It's not that hard to understand. Tungsten breaks first before anything ever happens to the wheel. Plus, I know I don't sharpen things on the side of my wheel, so this wheel is clean, which means there's no impurities going into my electrodes. So, just some food for thought. Alright, YouTube. Don't know if it's going to focus for me. There you go. I've got 3 nice tungstens and I'm ready to go start TIG welding. This is where the video ends, right? Wrong. This is where a lot of other videos end. What I want to show you real quick is what can happen to tungstens as you're welding, especially if you're just starting out. Now these tungstens have contamination in them, not from grinding. This one is contaminated with aluminum. This is what happens if you accidentally dip the electrode into your aluminum puddle when you're welding. And I know you're saying to yourself, why would you do that? When you're starting off, you will do it. You will do it with just about every type of material you're working on, whether it's mild steel, stainless steel, or aluminum. But that's what the edge of the tungsten is going to look like. This was sharpened just like that. Same deal with this one. I started this tungsten up with the wrong polarity on the machine for welding aluminum, and that's what happened to it. I just stuck the end of it in the puddle because I wasn't getting a decent arc, and that's what happens if you try to weld aluminum with DC current. This one is just very, very well used. The corrosion, or not corrosion, I'm sorry, the contamination goes from the front to right about here. So how do we clean these tungstens up? What do we have to do? This tungsten is just really, really short, and if I break it off where I need to break it, it's not even going to come out of the torch anymore. So this I'm just going to discard. These two still have some life left in them. So let me show you how to properly break off a tungsten. Alright guys, you're going to need 2 things. This is just a chunk of steel with a nice sharp edge on it. You can use the edge of your vise, you can use the edge of your table. I'm just using this because it's easier to film. Now I'm going to take my tungsten. You can see the contamination on it. I'm going to go slightly below the contamination. I'm going to take a regular hammer and I'm going to chip it. Just like that. One more time. The contamination on this tungsten goes back almost a ½ an inch. You want to take that contamination line and you put it above your edge. Take your hammer. Got a little bit more off than I wanted, but that is how you break a tungsten. Alright YouTube, first I want to apologize if any of the videos seemed a little rantish, but I see these professional welders online, and yes, they do a great service to the YouTube community and for the welding trade in general. But like I said, when you whip out a $500 grinder and like, this is how I sharpen my tungsten. No. If people are looking up videos on how to sharpen tungsten, they're beginning welders. Don't scare them off with a lot of big, expensive, scary stuff. It's not really a service to the trade. You know, you want to get people who are interested in welding and say, here, it's easy to get started, let me show you. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to do. But, you know, hey, the more advanced guys, they show people like me tips and tricks, and I'm really grateful for it. But the bottom line is, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to grind tungsten unless you might be welding on rockets. That being said, I'm going to leave you with one last little tip. And that would be the tip of your tungsten. People commonly ask, how long should my tungsten extend past the gas cup? This is a number 8 cup, and what I generally do, and it's a good baseline, if your gas cup is, let's say, a ½ an inch in diameter, safely you can take your tungsten and bring it out about a ½ an inch past the cup. The narrower that nozzle, or the opening rather, the shorter you're going to extend your tungsten. So it's a good baseline to follow, and it's in a couple of different textbooks. The tungsten stick out shouldn't exceed the diameter of your torch. So start there, pull it out a little, push it in a little, play with it, have fun, learn. Until the next time, this is Jeff at Darkmoon Metals. I'll see you again soon.